All right, guys, this is going to be the next phase of your video series here on how to paint metal art and get a show quality paint job on your metal art. The thing I want to show you here is basically the setup. You know, what is your setup? How are you going to stage the part? How are you going to make it accessible to be able to paint it? And, you know, one of the common ways to paint something like this metal art would be to hang it up, you know, hang it from, you know, some kind of hanger on a rack, you know. And this particular one, most items standard, I do not paint the back side on. I only paint the fronts. If somebody wants the back of it painted or primed, then I do charge extra for that. This particular one is actually getting that. It's going to be mounted outside. And here's the thing, real quick on that. If you're gonna if you're gonna sell something to somebody that's gonna hang it outside on a deck, even if it's not in the direct, you know, rain, you know how things, you know, outside get moisture affects them, they get humidity, they get dew on them. Well, if you have the back sides unpainted and dew forms on it, and it'll slowly start to flash rust and drip down and all that. So if it's going outside at all surfaces really need to be at least primed on the backside, which is what I do. But anyway, so let's take a look at the setup here. And this is one of the cheats that I'd like to talk to you about. And when I say cheat, I mean you want to use every possible thing to your advantage to get the nicest, smoothest, slickest paint job that you can. The one thing that the major thing that you can do to get a slick paint job on anything is wet sand and buff once the once your clear coat is dried, and that will give you you sand out all the orange peel, you sand out any imperfections, and then you buff it to a mirror shine. Well, first of all, trying to wet sand and buff a little piece like this is extremely difficult. One, it's small. You got to hold it down. You got to clamp it, you know, because the buffer is has a lot of power, and if you catch an edge on this or anything, then it's just going to sling it. And mentioning catching an edge, that's the other thing, is it's such a small piece, the edges are in play almost all the time. Really difficult thing to try to wet sand and buff. So that's and just the cost of it, you know, the customer, you know, this is a quick get it in, cut it on the table, get it prepped, get it painted, and get it out the door. I mean, and within that period of time, you want to do everything you can to give the customer the very nicest finish that you can. One, for just personal pride, and two, you want to differentiate yourself and, you know, demonstrate why someone should buy from you versus somebody that can sell it a little bit cheaper, that's got a powder coating oven. But I promise you, you cannot get the kind of finishes in powder coat that we're going to show you that you can get doing it this method. So here is one of the cheats, and it is get yourself set up with some kind of horizontal bench here. And you notice I've got a fixed station here, and I've got adjustable legs here. And the reason why that is because you want to put a level on this and get the bubble, let me try to show it to you there, dead in the center. So by having the adjustable legs on this side, you can raise it and lower it, because you may not put for me, I have to move things around. Sometimes I use different things, and I'm not even really painting in my permanent place. I'm still painting in the shop. I do have a paint booth that's under construction that will be eventually painting in, and I'll have a more permanent fixture set up in there. But for now, you know, when I move this around, I may not get it back in the same location every time, and the floor is not level, and you want to get this as level as possible. So you want to get it level that way and double check it across this way. So there's your cheat. If you don't get any other value out of this video series, this one right here is worth the $19 that you paid. No doubt about it. So, or $29, whatever you paid. You know, at the time I'm recording this, I'm not sure what the price is going to be. It's likely going to be $29. Even $29, it's still, these tips and tricks are going to stay with you, you know, forever. And especially if you're new to this and you've not, you know, have a lot of experience, you know, painting and that kind of thing. So, and why that is, you might keep saying, why is that important? Well, here's the thing. If you don't want to make a lot of mistakes and have a lot of, you know, corrections in your work, and you really have one shot at getting this right. And that's the bad thing about doing this kind of paint work, is it's not forgiving if you make mistakes, you know, and you're almost, when I make a mistake that's a pretty noticeable one in a job like this, I just make another one and I sell this one at a discount. It's just too much work to try to repair. I can make another one by the time I, you know, wait for it to cure a few days, wet sand it down, you know, figure out how to blend it in, whatever it is, and then repaint and re-clear. And it still may not look right if you try to, you know, repair it, because especially if it's candy, you can't really blend candy. You know, you can, but it's going to be very noticeable. So, the one thing that here's why getting this level is important, is you have a very flat surface here in the metal. There's no roughness. There's no, you know, anything in there. And you want to use that to your advantage. You want to use that definitely to your advantage. And the other things that you're going to see in the next couple of videos are everything we do from here on out is about making sure that we maintain this smooth, flat surface, and we don't introduce anything into it, or to the extent that we can, that would cause us to get a texture in the paint. You know, you guys know what orange peel is, which is the peel of an orange, that really textury looking stuff when you get up close to it. We don't want that, you know, because again, we're not going to wet sand and buff this. You can't get it out. If you're doing a car, hey, no problem. You know, and you have vertical surfaces on a car, like the doors and the sides of the fenders and all the way down the side of the car. That's no problem on that. You don't want to introduce a whole bunch of runs into that. So you're going to spray it on a little bit on the dry side, because you're going to wet sand and buff it out later, because a big paint job, a show quality paint job on a car pays $10,000, $20,000. We're talking about $100 or $150, $200 on metal art, you know, and there just isn't the labor in it. So here's what you get. So by laying it flat, you can float on more material without the risk of running. With this thing perfectly level and perfectly flat, you will not get a run in it. You can float, especially when we get to the clear coat, and you'll see that at the end. I'm going to show you, you know, a little bit about that. You can just fog on the clear. And the advantage to doing that is that the clear goes on so wet and so thick, you're not having to do, you know, 4 coats to get a nice, you know, you can basically put the equivalent of 4 coats in 2 coats. And it goes on there so wet and self-levels that it looks like it's wet sand and buff. It is so clear. And you guys will see, you know, some shots of this throughout the videos as I'm, you know, of some of the ones I've done. So spend the time, get yourself level, get yourself set up. All right, so I'm going to take you through 1 or 2 more steps here on the setup process, and then our next phase is going to be taking you to primer, and we'll be mixing and spraying primer. Okay, after you get your pieces up here and level, now remember, we've already sanded, we've already prepped, and we've already cleaned these things at least a couple times. So the next thing you want to do is just blow them off good. And here's a tip for you. If you're painting on a dirty floor, on your paint gun, you want to really just feather the trigger. You don't want a lot of pressure, because, you know, 120 PSI coming out of that nozzle is going to go and hit the dirt on the floor and stir up all kinds of extra dirt that you don't really want. So we're just trying to get the part clean, and also the bench space around it. Blow it off as well. So one tip that you want to keep in mind is that you want to watch out for things like this right here. If you see that this is contacting the area that it's sitting on directly and there's no space there, you want to shim this up with some paint sticks all the way around, because what will happen is when you get ready to spray your clear coat, the clear will actually bridge across that, and the clear will be on this and in this, and it'll actually completely seal that in. And if you don't move it until it's completely cured and set up, when you do get ready to move it, it'll actually have a potential to pull itself off of the piece. Now with epoxy primer, I've really not seen that happen, but it is, you know, I have seen it on like tape lines and things. And if you make that mistake, take a razor knife when you get ready to move it and just cut that seam right there, and that'll be something you can do as well if you forget to shim it, which occasionally that happens to me. So so once you've blown it off, the next thing you want to do is you want to clean it good again. We've already cleaned it with the heavy solvent, so now we're just using glass cleaner to remove any remaining, you know, fingerprints from picking it up or anything like that. And you can see we're not getting a lot off of it, but we are still getting some black on there. And this is less likely to be oil and grease that was on the original surface, and more likely to be fine sanding dust from our sanding process. But still, you know, it's just another time to get it clean. You see that last swipe there is pretty clean right there. Still got a little bit on it. And this is less important with epoxy primer. Epoxy primer is very thick, relatively speaking, and it adheres and sticks really well. On a candy paint job, you want to spend more time on the cleaning. All right, so once you do your final wipe here on the cleaning, you're still not done yet. And I'm going to show you this. And this was a step in the early days that I was skipping, and then boy did I regret it. Now this is more forgiving if you're doing a car paint job, because again, you're going to wet sand and buff it, so any little nibs or, you know, tiny fibers. The thing about it is when you wipe something off with a paper towel or a rag, it leaves fibers onto the panel. You can't see them. You cannot see them at all. But as soon as you put anything wet on there, boy, they show up like crazy. And occasionally I will forget this step. Now I've gotten a lot better at it, but occasionally I still forget it, and man, is it a huge regret. Just about every time I have to sell that at a discount, or possibly scuff it and re-clear it if it's just nibs. So now I spend extra time on this, and I really would recommend you do the same. So again, a little bit of air pressure, you know, just a low amount coming out. And you want to, some people recommend that you unfold this completely all the way out. I don't do that. I just try to, you know, keep it like this. And you want to just drag it lightly. And, you know, some people are going to argue with this technique, you know, and so forth. One thing that you can do is just blow it off real quick. Once you get done blowing it off, you want to just drag this lightly across it in the same direction. And just kind of work your way across the panel. And again, this is something that you do not want to skimp on. You do not want to skip. You do not want to get in a hurry. Because if you skip one part of the panel, and this has some kind of resin, sticky. It's not super sticky, it's just kind of tacky. And the reason you don't want to just wipe at it and press into it is you can transfer this material onto the panel, which could cause you adhesion problems. So you just want to drag it lightly and let it pick up those, you know, tiny, fine little pieces off the panel. So we just went across it in one way, going back across it in the same direction. And while I'm on this topic, here's another tip, and I'll show you, probably again later, but just in case I forget, before you get ready to paint, it's really good to have a paint suit. And once I get in my paint booth, I'm gonna start wearing one. One, it protects your clothing, but mainly it protects your panel from your clothing, because we get all kinds of stuff on us. One of the things that you can do before you paint is blow yourself off. Hopefully I'm in the camera here. And also blow your face and your hair off. Your hair is a harbinger to collect, bugs and mites, and no, I'm just kidding. It collects, all kinds of little, you might have dry skin, and little flakes of dry skin, which I do have, coming off of your face or out of your hair onto the panel. Every one of those that lands in it is going to be an imperfection in the clear. The one thing that I try to do is stay downwind of the panel. So in other words, I try to paint and keep myself in the direction that the airflow is blowing away from the panel, so that it's pulling it away from the panel instead of pulling it over it and landing onto it. So that's another technique you can do. All right, so we've got everything sprayed down. We've gone across this and wiped it off one way. We're now wiping it off another way. You're almost kind of sweeping it off. So that's about 3 times going over it. And once I get the primer mixed up and ready to spray, I'll come back over it one last time with this. So it's probably a total of like 4 times. And some of you might say, well, that sounds like a lot. Why do I have to do it that much? Trust me, when you start getting this material on here and you start to see the little imperfections show up, all this hard work, the money, everything that you put into it, you want to make sure you get it clean. This is the #1 thing you can do to keep dust and dirt out of your paint, because things continually land on it, and things, you may miss a spot as you're dragging across it, so go over it multiple times. All right, so that concludes this part of the video series. We're fully set up. We are ready to start spraying our epoxy primer, so that'll be up next.